Welcome, friend. I'm Jack, host of the channel, and today we're diving into another episode. Pour yourself a drink and get comfortable, because I've got a powerful story coming your way. If something hits deep, drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's get into it.
What do you do when you find out your wife has become an internet meme? A hypocritical one at that. That's just one of the thoughts that ran through my mind as I watched the video I just downloaded from my home server. It was early in the morning, and I was sitting in one of our data centers, waiting for updates to complete on several servers. Let me explain a bit. My name is John Matthew, and I work as an IT specialist for a bank with branches all over the state. For the last 3 years, I've been married to Laura, and until recently, I thought I had a good, stable marriage. We had even begun talking about starting a family, but sadly, that's not going to happen. Until a few months ago, Laura managed a pretty upscale hair salon downtown. What happened, you ask? Simple, the COVID-19 pandemic. Laura's salon, like many other businesses, had to close. Fortunately, I still had my job since banks were considered essential, especially with all the stimulus money being lent to businesses to keep them afloat. Our bank had already implemented a remote work program using VPNs, which worked well for me because it meant I could do most of my work from home. However, there were times when I had to drive to one of our data centers or branches to fix a problem. The first 2 weeks were great. Laura and I spent a lot of time together, much of it in bed, but the next 2 weeks were different. Things started to get a bit strained. I could tell Laura was eager to get back to work, and no one could blame her. A lot of people were just as eager to get back to making a decent living, but it seemed like something else was bothering her. At first, I couldn't put my finger on it. She became short-tempered and snippy over little things. She hated the fact that I sometimes had to leave to take care of problems that were normally handled by subcontractors. I couldn't help it, though. The bank had decided to scale back on its use of subcontractors during the pandemic to keep costs down. That meant I sometimes had to drive up to 150 miles to do things like replace a battery in a branch UPS or perform manual updates of software on back-end machines. It was during that second 2-week period that I began to notice some changes in Laura. For starters, there were several times I thought I caught a whiff of aftershave or cologne when I got home from one of my trips. I didn't use any of that stuff, so I naturally wondered where it was coming from. I thought that maybe it was coming from Laura, but that would mean she had to be in contact with another man. Nah, I thought, my Laura would never do that. Perhaps she had someone over to the house while I was gone, I wondered, but she never said that was the case. As time went on and the lockdown continued through the following month, the changes got worse. Laura became a screaming shrew, yelling at me over little things while I was trying to do my work in my office. Then the state health department issued a series of new rules and guidelines about social distancing, wearing masks, and other things. Some of it didn't make a lot of sense to me, but I'm an IT person, not a medical professional, so I figured I would do my best to follow the rules as long as they made some kind of sense. Laura, however, went off the deep end. Let me explain something about Laura first. As long as I've known her, she's always been a by-the-book kind of person. I guess that's one of the reasons her salon always did so well. Everything had to be done just right. She expected her employees to follow the rules, and they did. When the new guidelines came out, she went over them with a fine-tooth comb, making sure we did everything the state said we should do. If I had to leave for a job, she made sure I wore a mask, had at least 2 pairs of latex gloves, and gave me a bottle of hand sanitizer to keep in the truck, which was worth its weight in gold these days. All fine and good, I thought, but that wasn't enough for her. She went so far as to measure the distance between us in bed. When she realized there was no way we could keep 6 feet apart in our king-sized bed, she announced that I would have to sleep in the guest room until the crisis was over, which also meant no sex. "Are you out of your damn mind?" I asked. "We live in the same house, and we've been having sex all this time. Surely if we were going to get the virus, we would have by now." "It's only temporary," she said. "Besides, you know as well as I do that you can have this thing and not show any symptoms. Look, you're out there touching all kinds of things. There's no telling what you might be bringing home." But no sex, I asked. That's outrageous. It's affecting me as well, she said. I don't like it any more than you do, but the rules are the rules, and we have to follow the rules. But it didn't end there. Being one to go by the book, Laura decided that we could no longer share the same bathroom or eat at the table together, since that would put us closer than 6 feet apart. Donning heavy latex gloves, she split the dishes into 2 piles, one for me and one for her. We had to use only the dishes in our respective piles, and were responsible for washing what we used. But wait, there's more, as the commercials like to say. She decided that we needed to be responsible for washing our own clothes. Not only were we not sleeping together, but we also weren't eating together. Any day now, I suspected she would have us cooking our own food. For all intents and purposes, we had become little more than roommates living under the same roof, but nothing more. Then the mayor announced what some called a snitch line, and a website where residents could report neighbors and others not following the strict guidelines. I understood and appreciated the mayor's desire to keep residents safe, but I personally thought this was probably a bit much. I expressed my concern to Laura, but she had a different opinion. I think it's a great idea, she said. I can't tell you how many times I see people not following the social distancing rules. There's no telling what can happen out there. Well, I'm not going down that road, I said. Suit yourself, she said, but I intend to make good use of it. You're not going to snitch on our neighbors, are you? I asked. I considered several of them to be good friends, and the last thing I wanted was to see any of them get into trouble over something like violating a 6-foot social distancing guideline. It's for their own good, Laura huffed. If they don't care enough about their own health and well-being, then someone else needs to. But Laura, we have to live next to these people even after the pandemic is over. These are our friends, our neighbors. Well, then they'd better play by the rules, she said haughtily. I don't want to see one of us get sick because they were careless. All I'm going to say is just be careful. You do know we have sunshine laws in this state, right? If they find out you were the one who turned them in, it's going to affect both of us, and I damn sure don't want to lose any friends over something like this. If they follow the rules, they have nothing to fear, she said. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I shook my head and went to my office. That's when I realized my wife had turned into something of an internet meme. I had read about this in a few articles I saw online, some from various bloggers, but I had read some posts about them at more than one mainstream outlet. Karens, they were called. One site I read called them the policewomen of all human behavior, the kind of suburban woman who calls the cops on kids' pool parties. Another article described them as having a sense of entitlement, selfishness, a desire to complain. There were other articles that said similar things and still more that sounded like psychobabble to me, but as I thought about them, I could see elements of Laura in what the writers were describing. Was that my Laura? God, I hope not, I thought to myself. The next few days, I watched her closely. She spent a lot of time at the window, looking around at what the neighbors were doing. I know she called the snitch line a couple of times when she saw some of the neighbor kids playing in a yard across the street. Nothing happened when she called the first time, but about an hour after her second call, a police car stopped, and an officer spoke to the kids and one of the parents who lived at the house. After a few angry words were exchanged, the exasperated parent brought her children inside, and the others left. I only hoped the family who lived there never found out Laura was the one who ratted them out. There were other signs that things weren't as they should be in the Matthews household. I noticed, for example, that since the lockdown began, Laura seemed to make an excuse almost every single day to go to Walmart or another store. Ordinarily, I wouldn't notice, except that Walmart was only a 10-minute drive from the house. Laura is a very organized shopper who generally doesn't waste time in stores. She makes a list for the week's groceries, goes in, gets what she needs, then comes back. It's not like her to just buy 1 or 2 things at a time. That means an ordinary trip to Walmart for her normally lasted not much more than maybe 45 minutes to an hour at most. But now she would be gone for as long as 3 hours and maybe come home with a single small item for dinner. I knew there were lines, as the store was controlling their doors, but something about this just didn't add up. On top of that, there were days that she would actually get dressed up just to go to Walmart. Who the hell does that? Why not just wear jeans and a sweatshirt like she normally did? I wondered why she had to dress up like she was going out. I asked her about it a couple of times, but she would only sigh and tell me she simply wanted to look nice. "Do you have a problem with me wanting to look nice in public?" she asked with more than a little bit of attitude. "Not at all," I said. "I've just never known you to get all dolled up for Walmart." Making things worse, several times she would run straight to the master bathroom, a room I was no longer allowed to use, and take a shower after returning. Why would she need to do that if all she did was go grocery shopping for one or maybe two small items? I realized that when it comes to women, I may not be the sharpest tool in the box, but I certainly didn't just fall off the turnip truck last night. Something was going on, and I was determined to get to the bottom of it. Why would she get dressed up and leave for Walmart every day, about the same time, only to be gone for up to 3 hours? Something was definitely rotten in Denmark. I tried to believe her. After all, I had seen some of the lines going into the stores myself, but 45 days into the lockdown, I knew something wasn't adding up. I pulled out my cell phone and called Tom Richards, an old friend from college who now ran his own private investigative company. "What's up, buddy?" he asked. He listened quietly as I explained the situation to him. "Damn, that doesn't sound good at all. Email me a recent picture of Laura if you would, and I'll get started. Maybe you ought to put some cameras in your house and have them stream to that server of yours." "Good idea," I said as I emailed a picture of Laura to him. "I've got some here that aren't being used," he told me. "If you want, you can borrow those and set them up. Meet me over by your office this afternoon, and I'll get them to you if that'll work." "That'll work," I said. "I'll be there about 3. She's usually back from Walmart by then." "Gotcha," Tom said. "Your office 3. I'll be there. I just got your email, by the way. Thanks." "No, thank you. I just want to get to the bottom of this." "You may not like what you find," Tom said. "I don't like what's going on now," I told him. "See you this afternoon, buddy." We ended the call, and I pondered his words for a moment. I may not like what he finds out, but I figured that sure beat the hell out of what's going on right now. Better to face it head on, deal with it, and move forward. I showered, changed, and left, putting a note on the kitchen counter letting Laura know I would be gone until later that afternoon. I met Tom outside the entrance to the building where my office was located. He handed me a box with 3 very small devices he said were motion-activated cameras that could be installed practically anywhere, even in smoke detectors. He also gave me a sheet that detailed the installation process. "I hope things work out for you, John. I'll get on this right away and let you know what I find out." "Okay, thanks, Tom. I appreciate it." After he left, I went inside and found that some UPS batteries and several DVDs had been delivered while I was out. Checking my work email and our in-house ticketing system, I learned the upgrades and battery replacements were scheduled to be done this evening after normal banking hours. Looking at the clock, I realized I had just about enough time to get home and set the cameras up before grabbing a couple of hours of sleep for the night. I got home and found that Laura still hadn't returned, so I grabbed my ladder and headed into the master bedroom, a place I had been exiled from. Out of curiosity, I looked in her hamper and found a pair of underwear that looked like they had some crusty stains in the gusset. Disgusted, I set about my task. As I was finishing installing the camera in the smoke detector, Laura came into the room. I could instantly detect the odor of a man's cologne on her, along with something else. "What are you doing in my room?" she asked. "Your room?" I responded. "The last time I looked, my name is on the mortgage, which means I can go into any damn room I choose to, and that includes the master bedroom, you know, the place where you and I used to sleep together." She recoiled from that. I rarely, if ever, talked to her like that. "Just so you know, I had to change the battery in the smoke detector. I'll be doing the same in the guest room and the living room." "Okay," she said, "you don't have to be so short with me." I said nothing and finished my work as she went into the bathroom to take a shower. From there, I went into the guest room where I had been sleeping and did the same. My next stop was the living room. After I finished, I replaced the ladder and went into my office to make sure the cameras would connect to my server. It took a few minutes, but I was happy with the results. The images were clear, and I could hear everything going on through the tiny microphones. I watched as Laura came out of the bathroom and put on a pair of jeans and a light sweatshirt. I hoped that nothing incriminating would be caught, and we could move ahead. After I finished, I headed upstairs to what was now my bedroom. I have to go to the data center tonight to install some updates on our servers, I told Laura as I got to the top of the stairs. She seemed happy to hear that I would be gone. I'll probably be gone almost the whole night, so I'm going to get a couple of hours of sleep before I have to leave. Okay, she said as she walked off, apparently unconcerned that I would be gone. It didn't escape me that she didn't even bother to say goodnight. I could remember a time when an announcement like that would upset her. I shook my head and went into my room, where I laid down and tried to sleep for a couple of hours. I woke up when my alarm went off and stumbled into the bathroom, where I brushed my teeth and took a shower. I dressed and headed downstairs, where I made a sandwich and grabbed a cup of coffee for the road. Laura was sitting on the couch and didn't even say a word to me. I felt as though I needed to reach out to her, to say something. "Laura," I said from the dining room table. She turned to look at me. "What?" she asked. "Do you still love me?" "Of course," she said. "Why do you ask?" "I was just wondering. You're never civil to me anymore. You never even tell me that you love me, and we haven't had sex in a long time." Exasperated, she sighed heavily before responding. "Is that what's bugging you? No sex?" she asked. "It has been a while, and we used to make love pretty regularly," I said. "Now we're basically roommates. Is something going on?" "Look, maybe I'm just tired of being locked down in the house all the time, okay?" she said. "It's not easy for me either. I'm just concerned that we're drifting apart." She nodded her head. "Maybe you're right. I'm sorry if it seems like I've been out of sorts lately. Maybe after all this is over, we can go somewhere for a nice vacation." "Yeah, that would be nice. Personally, I didn't think that would ever happen, but I went along with it. Look, I'm going to be gone for most of the night to get these updates done. I'll call you when I'm ready to come home." "Okay," she said. "Thanks." She went back to watching her program. After I finished eating, I went into the office, checked to make sure my server was doing its thing, grabbed my briefcase, and locked the door after I left. I looked at Laura as I opened the front door to leave the house. "I'm headed out now. Love you," I said. She didn't even bother to look up at me. "Yeah, me too," she said. I stood there for a couple of moments and realized that was all I was going to get from her. There used to be a time when she would send me off with a hot kiss, but I guess those days are over, I thought as I nodded my head. "Goodbye, Laura," I said, closing the door behind me. I got in my truck and headed out, my heart heavy. It took a little over an hour for me to reach the data center. I went in, replaced the UPS batteries, and started the upgrade script. I knew this would take several hours to complete, so I grabbed some coffee and sat down at the desk. I pulled out my personal laptop, connected to the network, and logged into my home server. I found several videos from earlier, so I checked them out. There wasn't anything unusual there, just short videos of me sleeping, Laura going into the front room, that sort of thing. I noticed that several times she pulled out her cell phone and was busy texting someone. I hadn't had a chance to check her phone since she always kept it with her, so I had no idea who she was texting. One short video showed Laura in the master bedroom. She was holding a wedding photo that normally sat on the dresser. From the timestamp on the video, I knew this happened as I slept. She looked at the photo wistfully, then set it face down on the dresser before she left the room. There were a couple of other videos. One showed me getting ready for work, and the other showed our discussion before I left. I couldn't help but notice that, aside from her heavy sighing, Laura showed very little emotion during that discussion, and she showed even less when I told her goodbye. It got very interesting after I closed the door, however. She looked at the door for a few moments, then got up to see if I had left. Once she was convinced I was gone for the evening, she pulled out her phone and made a call. Unfortunately, I could only hear one side of the conversation. "Hey, lover," she said, smiling. "Yeah, he's gone. Probably all night. You ready to come over and play in my bed?" She laughed. "Of course, anywhere else you want." There was a pause as she listened. You want me to do what? Really? Okay, just for you. Hurry and get over here. I'm getting excited just thinking about you. She giggled, her voice dripping with excitement. Yeah, okay. Love you, stud muffin. See you soon. What the hell? I asked myself. It was now clear to me that Laura no longer loved me and had fallen in love with someone else. As I watched, Laura went upstairs to the master bedroom. She picked up our wedding photo and giggled as she looked at it. Don't you wish you were here so you could watch me? She asked before putting the picture back face down. The next video showed her back in the front room, standing naked as she looked out the window. A few minutes later, a car pulled into the driveway. She opened the door and stood naked as a man stepped onto the porch. He smiled and took her in his arms, kissing her deeply. She responded. It had been a long time since she had even touched me, let alone given me a kiss like this. I felt as if my heart was being ripped out of my chest. They came into the room, and I got a good look at the man's face. He looked somewhat familiar, but I couldn't quite place him. His dark hair was well cut and combed back, making him look like something you'd see in those pictures they often put up in hair salons. That's when it hit me. He was a hairdresser who worked in the salon Laura managed. I vaguely remembered meeting him once before when I stopped by to see her. So, is the loser gone all night? He asked her. Yep, all night, she said with a huge smile. Come on, let's go upstairs and have some fun. I'm so excited for you right now. Then they ran up the stairs into what used to be our master bedroom. The video ended, and I saw another had just been saved to the server, so I opened it. This video picked up where the previous one ended. Laura and her lover were in the bedroom, and she had gotten on the bed. It's not our marital bed anymore, she said. I kicked him out of the bedroom just like you suggested. This is my bed now, or better yet, our bed, yours and mine. That explained a lot, I thought. They had obviously planned this all out. Too bad the chicken isn't here to watch a real man having fun with you, he said with a wicked grin. She laughed. Maybe later. Forget about him right now. I need you to be with me. I can't begin to describe the emotions that went through me as I watched and listened to them degrade and humiliate me in my own house, in what I thought was my marital bed. Part of me was sad for the loss of what I once thought was a beautiful thing. Another part of me was furious with blind, seething hate and rage. After all the years I had given her, supported her, and took care of her, this was the thanks I got. It was probably a good thing I wasn't there when this was going on, I thought. I would probably have gotten my gun and killed both of them where they lay. But that would only see me put in jail, and I didn't want that. It's amazing how much a person's feelings can change in such a short time. At this moment, I didn't see Laura as my soulmate. She certainly wasn't my wife. For that matter, I had difficulty even thinking of her as a woman. She was just a self-absorbed liar. I had to get away from this before I went crazy. I stopped the video and left the data center. I drove to a convenience store and bought a couple of packs of cigarettes and a 6-pack of Coke. I would have bought some beer, but I still had a job to finish, and I would need to be able to drive back to the house. It had been years since I smoked, but I felt I needed one before I completely lost it. I sat in the truck and smoked a cigarette before heading back into the data center, thinking about what I needed to do. Divorce was a no-brainer, but it wouldn't be nearly enough. I had to get some measure of revenge on Laura and her lover for what they were putting me through. But what could I do that wouldn't land me in jail? I went back into the data center and checked on the updates, then sat down again to finish watching the video. I had read stories where guys talk about getting excited at seeing their sexy wives with other men, but that didn't happen to me, thank goodness. Sure, Laura was a sexy woman, but what I felt watching them wasn't excitement. It was pure hatred. After I finished the updates, I decided to head home. I didn't want to keep watching any more of those videos. I couldn't bear it anymore. My mind was already spinning with rage and betrayal, and I needed to get some clarity before I did something reckless. I knew what I needed to do next. I was going to confront her, but it had to be planned out carefully. The next day, I called my lawyer first thing in the morning. I knew this was over. There was no fixing our marriage after what I had seen, and I wasn't going to give her a chance to try to manipulate me into staying. I explained the situation to him and told him I wanted to file for divorce immediately. "John, I know this is hard," my lawyer said after I finished, "but it's important that you don't lose your cool. We'll file the paperwork and she'll get served soon. Until then, just keep your distance as much as you can." "I know," I replied, "but I'm not just going to sit around and let her play house with that guy in my own home." I hung up the phone and sat in silence for a while, trying to gather my thoughts. The anger in me hadn't cooled at all. If anything, it was burning hotter. I couldn't let this slide. She had to pay for what she did to me. Both of them did. That afternoon, I returned home earlier than usual, determined to confront Laura. As I stepped through the door, I could hear the faint sound of music coming from the living room. Laura was lounging on the couch, sipping a glass of wine like nothing had happened. She didn't even look surprised to see me home early. If anything, she seemed a bit too relaxed, too comfortable. "Hey," she said with a half smile, as if she hadn't been caught cheating on me the night before. "You're home early." I could feel the anger rising in my throat, but I kept my voice steady. "We need to talk." "Oh," she said, raising an eyebrow, still oblivious to the storm that was about to come crashing down. "What about?" I took a deep breath, trying to keep my composure. "I know everything, Laura. I know about you and Tony." Her face paled instantly. "What are you talking about?" she stammered, her glass trembling slightly in her hand. "Don't play dumb with me," I snapped. "I've seen the videos. I've heard the phone calls. I watched you bring him into our bed, my bed." Laura's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. She was caught, and she knew it. "John, I can explain," she finally said, her voice weak. "Explain?" I laughed bitterly. "Explain what? That you've been screwing him behind my back while I'm out working to pay the bills? That you've been plotting this for weeks? There's nothing to explain, Laura." Tears welled up in her eyes. "John, please. Pack your things," I cut her off coldly. "Get out. I'm filing for divorce and I want you gone by tonight." But where am I supposed to go?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Tony's place isn't ready for me to stay there yet. Please, can't we talk about this?" "I don't care where you go," I said flatly. "You've made your choice. Now deal with it." For a moment, Laura stood there frozen, staring at me in disbelief. Then she slowly turned and walked upstairs to start packing. I could hear her sobbing as she moved around the bedroom, but I didn't feel an ounce of sympathy. All I felt was relief. I went outside and sat on the front porch, lighting a cigarette to calm my nerves. I stared out at the street, thinking about how different everything was going to be from now on. I'd given her everything: love, trust, stability, and she'd thrown it all away for some cheap fling with a guy who wasn't half the man I was. Well, that was her problem now. When she came down with her bags an hour later, I stood up and opened the door for her. She looked at me with tear-streaked eyes, her lip trembling, but I didn't waver. "I'm sorry, John," she whispered. "Too late for that," I said, cold as ice. "Goodbye, Laura." Without another word, she left. I watched as she loaded her things into her car and drove away, leaving me standing on the porch, feeling both empty and liberated at the same time. The house was finally mine again, free from her lies, free from her betrayal. Over the next several days, I had more than enough time to reflect on everything that had happened. While I felt a sense of closure, knowing that Laura was gone, I couldn't help but feel a strange mix of emotions. On one hand, I was relieved that the entire nightmare was over, and I no longer had to deal with the emotional torment she had put me through. On the other hand, it was hard to believe that the woman I once loved so deeply was gone forever. Despite her betrayal, part of me still felt sad for the life that we had lost, for the future we would never have. Carrie had been my rock throughout all of this. She was there to support me when I needed it most, and I was incredibly grateful to have her by my side. She had moved in with me permanently, and we were making plans for our future together. I felt like I was finally getting a second chance at happiness, and this time I was determined not to let anything stand in the way of that. We continued to work on getting the house ready to sell. It was strange, packing up the remnants of my old life and preparing to move on, but I knew it was necessary. I couldn't stay in that house, surrounded by memories of a failed marriage. Carrie and I found a buyer quickly, and within a few weeks, the house was sold. We moved into a smaller, cozier home that was perfect for us, and I felt a sense of relief as we closed the door on that chapter of our lives. Life with Carrie was everything I had hoped for. She was warm, loving, and completely devoted to me. We spent our days planning for the future, and I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in a long time. She truly made me believe that despite everything that had happened, I could still find happiness. One evening, as we sat together on the porch of our new home, Carrie turned to me and smiled. "You know," she said, "I think this is just the beginning for us." I nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "I think you're right," I replied, pulling her close. We sat in silence for a while, watching the sunset. In that moment, I knew that no matter what the future held, we would face it together. The following months passed in a blur as Carrie and I settled into our new life together. It was strange at first, getting used to the idea that Laura was truly gone and that I was now free to move forward with my life. But with Carrie by my side, it became easier each day. We had built a life together that was full of love, trust, and understanding, everything I had once hoped for but never truly had with Laura. Carrie was everything I could have ever wanted in a partner. She was kind, compassionate, and always seemed to know exactly what I needed, even before I did. I found myself falling more and more in love with her each day, and I knew without a doubt that she was the one I was meant to spend the rest of my life with. One day, as we were sitting at the kitchen table having breakfast, Carrie looked at me with a soft smile. "John," she said, "there's something I want to talk to you about." I set down my coffee cup and looked at her, curious. "What is it?" She took a deep breath, her fingers nervously fidgeting with the edge of her napkin. "I know we've both been through a lot, and I don't want to rush you, but I was thinking that maybe it's time we start thinking about the future." I raised an eyebrow, unsure of where she was going with this. "The future?" She nodded, her eyes locking with mine. "Yes, I love you, John, and I want to be with you for the rest of my life. I know it's only been a few months since everything happened, but I feel like we're ready to take the next step." It took me a moment to process what she was saying, but when I did, a wave of warmth spread through me. "Carrie, are you talking about getting married?" Her smile widened, and she nodded again. "Yes, I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I know it might seem soon, but I don't want to wait any longer. I want us to build a life together, officially." I sat back in my chair, feeling a mix of emotions wash over me. Part of me was surprised, after all. It hadn't been that long since Laura's death and the divorce proceedings. But another part of me, a much larger part, was thrilled. I loved Carrie more than I ever thought possible, and the idea of marrying her felt right in every way. "I love you too, Carrie," I said softly. "And I think you're right. We've both been through so much, and we deserve to be happy. I can't think of anything I want more than to marry you." Her eyes sparkled with happiness as she reached across the table and took my hand. "Really?" "Really," I said, smiling. "I want to marry you, Carrie. I want us to spend the rest of our lives together." She jumped out of her chair and threw her arms around me, her laughter filling the room. "I can't believe it. We're getting married," she squealed. I held her close, feeling my heart swell with love for this incredible woman. "Yes, we are," I said, kissing her softly, "and I can't wait." The weeks that followed were filled with excitement as Carrie and I began planning our wedding. We decided to keep things simple, a small ceremony with just close family and friends. Neither of us wanted anything extravagant, especially after everything we'd been through. We both agreed that what mattered most was starting our life together, not the size of the wedding. Carrie's sister, her closest family, was more than excited for her. She helped with every detail of the preparations, from choosing the flowers to deciding on the music for the ceremony. I, on the other hand, felt a bit like I was just along for the ride. But seeing the happiness on Carrie's face made it all worth it. My family was happy for us as well. They had supported me through the rough patches and were genuinely glad to see me moving on with my life. They had all loved Carrie from the moment they met her and couldn't have been more thrilled about our decision to get married. It felt like everything was finally falling into place. As the day of the wedding approached, I couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. It had only been months since my world had been turned upside down, but now here I was, getting ready to marry a woman who had completely changed my life for the better. Part of me still couldn't believe how much had happened in such a short amount of time. But as I stood there at the altar, waiting for Carrie to walk down the aisle, all of those doubts and uncertainties melted away. When I saw her, dressed in a simple white gown that perfectly suited her, all I could think about was how lucky I was to have found her. The ceremony was beautiful. We exchanged vows in front of a small gathering of our closest friends and family, and as I slid the ring onto Carrie's finger, I knew without a doubt that this was where I was meant to be. This was the future I had been waiting for. As the reception carried on into the evening, Carrie and I shared our first dance as husband and wife. The world around us seemed to disappear as we held each other close, lost in the moment. I had never felt more at peace, more content than I did in that moment. Later that night, after the guests had left and we were finally alone, I pulled Carrie close and kissed her softly. "I love you," I whispered against her lips. "I love you too, John," she whispered back, her eyes shining with happiness. "Thank you for making me the happiest woman in the world." The days following our wedding were a whirlwind of happiness. Carrie and I decided to take a short trip to a nearby cabin in the mountains for our honeymoon. It wasn't anything extravagant, but it was perfect for us. A peaceful retreat where we could relax and enjoy our time together without any distractions. The cabin was nestled in a quiet, wooded area, far away from the hustle and bustle of everyday life. We spent our days hiking, cooking meals together, and just enjoying each other's company. At night, we'd sit by the fire, talking about our plans for the future. I had never felt so connected to someone before. Carrie wasn't just my wife, she was my best friend. One evening, as we sat outside on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains, Carrie reached over and took my hand. "John," she said softly, her eyes full of emotion, "I just want you to know that no matter what happens in life, I will always be by your side. I know we've both been through so much, but I believe everything happens for a reason. We were meant to find each other." I looked into her eyes, feeling overwhelmed by how much love I had for this woman. "I believe that too," I told her. "You've brought so much light into my life, Carrie. I don't know how I would have gotten through everything without you." We sat there in comfortable silence for a while, just enjoying the moment. It was a kind of peace I hadn't felt in a long time, and I knew that with Carrie, I had finally found a new beginning. When we returned home from our honeymoon, we were ready to start the next chapter of our lives together. We both knew that it wouldn't always be easy. Life had a way of throwing curveballs when you least expected them, but we were determined to face whatever came our way as a team. Carrie moved into my house permanently, and we began making plans to sell it and find a place that truly felt like ours. We didn't want to rush the process, so we took our time, looking at different homes and talking about what kind of future we wanted to build together. One day, as we were walking through a neighborhood we liked, Carrie turned to me with a smile. "John," she said, "I have something to tell you." Her tone was serious, but there was a sparkle in her eyes. "What is it?" I asked, curious. "I'm pregnant." For a moment, I was stunned. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. "Are you serious?" I asked, my heart pounding with excitement. She nodded, tears of happiness filling her eyes. "Yes, we're going to have a baby." But I pulled her into my arms, unable to contain my joy. "I can't believe it. This is amazing," I said, holding her tightly. "We're going to be parents."
Thanks for hanging out with me on today's episode, brother. I'm Jack, host of this podcast, and it's great having you here. If today's story hit home, send it on to a buddy who might need it. Remember, we're all in this together, turning life's curvy balls into wins. If you have an opinion or story to share, then drop a line in the comments section. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss out. Until next time, keep your chin up and keep pushing forward. Stay strong, folks.